Facebook. All right, now the drift starts now. Now, low voter turnout has marked the Isiolo South by-elections, with some observers raising allegations of possible irregularities in the exercise. The mini poll has attracted attention as two siblings battle for the seat that was previously held by their late father, Mohammed Tobi, who passed away last year. Of the United Democratic Alliance, that is UDA, is facing off with his sister Binat Tobi of the Jubilee Party. A total of 22,161 registered voters are expected to elect their next member of county assembly. However, polling stations reported shorter queues, with many voters keeping away from the exercise. The Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission, that is the IBC, indicated that by 1 p.m. only about 30% of the registered voters had turned out to cast their ballots.
Hiyo utakosa, utakubali? Hiyo ikiwa inaweza kosa sasa. Hiyo ikiwa hapa ni sure, tuko sure Isiolo South wako na imani, wako sure na wako sawa ndani ya chama ya UDA.
And in one incident here in Kina, we were able to identify bribery happening just behind the election room. And also we've also seen a group of politicians coming here and sitting down. We strongly believe that this is a violation of...
We don't have voters' bribery within the precincts of polling stations. Polling stations are 400-meter radius area. That's the definition of a polling station.
Kuna ile upole na unajua unyenyekevu wakati ya Ramadhan huwa Waislamu wanakuwa naye. Hawataki kuonekana ya kwamba wanafanya siasa mingi ama vitu ya uhasama na nini. Lakini licha hiyo tunaona ya kwamba upigaji kura sasa kiwango inaendelea kupanda. Asubuhi ilikuwa chini kidogo, lakini saa hii inaendelea kupanda.
At the same time, one person was arrested at Akalo polling center in Kakamega on suspicion of disrupting voting activities. Police officers stationed at the center were forced to disperse a crowd that had begun forming as voters turned up to participate in the West Cabras ward by-election. Some voters also raised concerns over the malfunctioning of the chemist kit, with several reporting difficulties during the biometric identification. Now, the West Cabras ward seat has attracted 6 candidates, with approximately 11,000 registered voters spread across 25 polling stations.
La kwanza ni kukondem kisa ambayo imefanyika hapa asubuhi, lakini pia tunashukuru polisi walikuwa karibu na waka tackle that issue, na kura inaendelea kupigwa saa hii salama. Sisi tunaomba tu watu wa West Cabras wapige kura kwa amani na wasitishwe na watu ambao wanazunguka ambao wana agenda ya mipini na nini.
Nilikuja hapa saa 12 asubuhi. Nimekaa hapa nikiwa na hamu sana ya kupiga kura. Bado kufika saa hii laini imekuwa ndefu. Nimekaa kwa laini mpaka hata nimechoka. Mashini ya huko ndani inafanya kazi polepole.
Mimi nilikamua nikaacha maziwa kwa nyumba, hata katuka nimefunga. Hata nilikuwa nataka watu waende kwa samba kupanda, nikawasimamisha. Naendelea tu, ingawaje ni mgonjwa lakini wameniambia watani.
Now, Kenya has officially launched the national rollout of the new HIV prevention drug, that is Lenacapavir, targeting 15 counties in its first phase. Speaking during the launch event held at Riruta Hospital in Dagoretti North Sub-County, Health Cabinet Secretary Eden Duale described the move as a major boost to the country's HIV prevention strategies. The CS raised concern over the rising number of new HIV infections among young people, calling for stronger collaboration among stakeholders to curb the spread of the epidemic. Now, he emphasized that the need for collective efforts from government agencies, health workers, and community organizations to protect vulnerable groups and reduce the new infections.
That there have been misinformation circulating about this medicine. Let me assure the public and our citizens clearly and firmly, Lenacapavir has been properly procured through established government systems with the support from the Global Fund. It has not been rushed. It has not been bypassed by any procedure. Every step has been followed in accordance with the law and our national health guidelines.
Advocate for is that everyone who is living with HIV must adhere to their treatment so that we get to what she called U is equal to U. That means that everyone has undetectable viral load so that they don't transmit. But for those still in darkness, Lenakapavir has come. And that is the message that the ministry and the Kenyan government is giving.
All right, moving on, tensions flared during the Ivurore ward by-elections in Embu County on Thursday after the chief agent of DP candidate Albert Kigoro was allegedly attacked by a polling station, or at a polling station. Now, the incident occurred at Jaranga Primary School polling station, disrupting the electoral process and raising questions over voter intimidation. Kevin Mwendwa said that he was monitoring the voting process when a group of assailants confronted him. And in the ensuing melee, he claimed that a vehicle belonging to candidate Albert Kigoro, which he was using, was vandalized. Speaking after the incident, Mwendwa termed the attack as an act of intimidation aimed at frustrating his legally mandated oversight role of scaring voters away from the polling station. Now, he maintained that his presence was solely to ensure a transparent and credible process as provided over for under electoral law.
Hapa unaona kichwa huku naumia na kimbisho hospitali saa hii, at least nimepiga ripoti kwa polisi. Na pia nauliza maafisa wetu wa polisi kila mahali, na ikiwezekana waongezeke hapa. Tunataka kutuma hiyo ujumbe huko juu. IG Inspector General, tunataka ulinzi, tunataka safety. Hatusikii kama tuko safe hapa Ivurore. Kwa hivyo mimi ningeuliza tu watu wa Ivurore watokee kwa wingi na wapige kura. Mwenye atashinda ndiye kiongozi wetu.
Now, David Maraga, the former Chief Justice and United Green Movement UGM presidential aspirant, has pledged to completely eradicate corruption in if elected president. Maraga vowed that no one, including his allies, friends or party members, would be spared if found guilty of graft. Speaking in Kagungundo during the launch of a new UGM office, he condemned the rampant misuse of public funds. He cited shortages of medicine in hospitals, mismanagement of education funds, and the alleged disappearance of 11 billion Kenya shillings meant for the Talanta Stadium project. Maraga accused senior government officials of treating public offices like personal ATMs, insisting that accountability must be enforced at all levels of leadership. UGM leaders also urged Kenyans to register as voters in large numbers, describing the ballot as the most powerful tool for change as they seek to unseat President William Ruto in the next general election.
Marafiki zangu sitakubali waibe mali ya umma. Umeona hawa vijana? Nimewaelezea ya kwamba wachaguliwa wakuje wafuate sheria. Kama yeyote akijihusisha na mambo ya wizi wa mali ya serikali, bila weka ndani, hata nyinyi taweka ndani. Hakuna ya mapendeleo. Tukimaliza hiyo, Kenya itapona. Niambia ya kwamba Wakenya wanaweza kukasirika kabisa, lakini tukikasirika bila kura itakuwa ni kazi bure, au sivyo? Marafiki zangu sitakubali waibe mali ya umma. Umeona hawa vijana? Nimewaelezea ya kwamba wachaguliwa wakuje wafuate sheria. Kama yeyote akijihusisha na mambo ya wizi wa mali ya serikali, bila weka ndani, hata nyinyi.
Now, President William Ruto has urged young people across the country to reject ethnic divisions and instead embrace patriotism as Kenya works towards national transformation. Speaking during the graduation ceremony of 3,862 prison officers at the Prisons Staff Training College in Ruiru, the president called on Kenyans to support the government's development agenda aimed at uplifting the country to greater heights. Now, the head of state also highlighted measures taken to improve the welfare of prison officers, including the construction of 5,000 house units. He further announced plans to build an additional 28,000 institutional housing units for prison officers nationwide.
Hayo ya kubadilisha taifa letu la Kenya. Tumesema ya kwamba tunataka kujenga barabara zaidi, tunataka kujenga airport na kujenga reli, tunataka kujenga mabwawa ya maji ndio tuondoe mambo ya njaa katika taifa letu la Kenya, tufanye irrigation. Tumesema pia tuzalishe umeme ambayo itatusaidia kwa mambo ya industrialization. Wakijaribu kusema nyinyi ni Wakalenjin, muambie sisi ni Wakenya. Wakisema nyinyi ni Wakikuyu, waambie hapana, sisi ni Wakenya. Wakisema nyinyi ni Wakisii, waambie hapana, sisi ni Wakenya. Kwa sababu unity in diversity is what will...
Right, moving on, Nairobi Governor Johnson Arthur Sakaja has defended the cooperation agreement with the national government, saying the agreement is neither unusual or nor illegal, but rather a long overdue framework grounded in law and aligned with global best practice. Sakaja argued that Nairobi's current allocation is insufficient to match the demands of a vast growing capital, and that the injection of 80 billion Kenya shillings by the national government will enhance service delivery.
Constitution that elevates the people above all of these things that you're saying. Governor, I've seen you doing public participation before you embarked on projects. When we had this conversation in the when Karungo Wathango was the chair of housing, and you wanted to do Woodley, for instance, we were engaging members of public from Woodley before you ever did the groundbreaking. And then once that was complete, we proceed with the project. Surely, Governor, you know that what you're saying is not true.
Chair, please allow me to answer questions asked. Yeah? We will hear what the views are. Already, I've had things that need to be amended. Already, from the public, I have had. But both levels of government then will review what has come from the people. We'll have to review it. But there must be an agreement. Guys, the capital will not change without this provision. Unless you tell me another provision of adding 80 billion or 100 billion to the city, there is, please, provide, if it's conditional grants, do it, you're the Senate. Give it to us, yeah? Let me hear during the budget policy statement that you've increased Nairobi's allocation by 80. I will tear this agreement, I will not need it. But for now, I must, as the governor, as a responsible governor, who cares for his people, I must find whichever way that will get me resources to sort of this city. I must get it. Lazima iwak.
Now, the ODM caucus of county chairpersons has endorsed the suspension of Edwin Sifuna as the party secretary general. The caucus, which met under the chairmanship of Kakamega Governor Fernandez Baraza, declared its support for Buru Oginga as the party leader and urged him to stabilize and steady as the party general, even as they head to 2027. Now, Oburu, who called for unity, also called for unity within the party. Take a look.
Kwanza kabisa kumpatia mamlaka kinara wetu wa chama Daktari Oburu Oginga kuanza mazungumuzo na vyama ili tuunde serikali mwaka 2027. Na chama cha kwanza ambacho tumepatia mamlaka Daktari Oburu kuongea nacho ni chama cha UDA. Tena leo katika mkutano wetu tunaunga mkono uamuzi wa chama kuondoa rasmi aliyekuwa katibu mkuu Edwin Sifuna.
Hakuna uchaguzi unafanywa katika NDC wa 2027. Najua wengi wanasema uchaguzi itakuwa watatend NDC itwe. Sasa NDC imeitwa, mambo ya uchaguzi tulimaliza Mombasa. Na delegates wote walikuwa Mombasa kwa NEC. Baadaye kulikuwa na mkutano wa Central Committee ambaye pia ulifanywa eneo la Pwani na yale yalipitishwa.
Alright, it is exactly 30 minutes past the top of the hour. That particular story takes us on a fast breather here on The Drift, but we'll be back in just a bit. Zimbabwe, who was denied entry at JKIA, detained and expelled on February 22nd of 2026. And of course, there is a picture there of Kiza BCJ from Uganda, who was abducted in Nairobi on November 16th of 2024 and sent to detention in Uganda. And of course, Bob Njagi, who's a Kenyan actually, seized in Nairobi on August 19th, 2024, and forcibly disappeared for a month. All right. Now, Tanzanian Macharia was escaped an attempted kidnapping in Nairobi in December 2024. And Nicholas Oyo, who's a Kenyan as well, kidnapped alongside Bob Njagi and detained in Uganda for 38 days later. Or 38 days, that was last year actually. Now Martin Mavenjina from Uganda detained at JKIA and deported to Uganda on July 5th of 2025 despite a valid visa. And of course, Mwabili Mwagodi, who's a Kenyan, was abducted in Tanzania last July and arrested in Kenya this month. Right, and of course, when you check out, these stories, the Daily Nation is actually asking, is activists, or our activists, under siege? And of course, one would ask the question, are we turning into a dictatorship country? Right? Tell us your thoughts. on the Raw SMS line, that is 23059, and Zimbabwean lawyer Brian Kagoro landed at Nairobi's JKIA last Sunday for what would have been a routine reception by immigration officials. Instead, he was denied entry, detained and expelled. On the same day, Tanzanian rights defender Mshabaha Hamza was enduring a harrowing ordeal 30 kilometers away. Now their plight adds to a troubling pattern of the prosecution of voices against government's excesses. And of course, these are cases which have come to light since, the anti-government protests in 2024. You'll remember the anti-finance bill protest, which were mad on June 25th of 2024, of course, which was actually witnessed again for the better part of 2025, June 25th, and of course, during the protest against the killing of Alberto Joang in Central Police Station. All right, quite unfortunate story right there. You can actually get that on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. Now, other stories making headlines. Russian wants to kill me, suspected mercenary tells police as he surrenders. Of course, that's a story we had taken a look at on yesterday's dailies. That's a story as well on page 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation, and as well as matters corruption, SHA fraud, DPP wants 15 hospitals owners charged. That's as well on page 2. And on matters election, you remember that yesterday actually there were by-elections in several parts of the country, including Isiolo, Embu, and some other county which were holding their by-elections yesterday actually. Now, how an extra 9,000 polling station will be distributed, that's on page 10 on matters election, even as we gear up for 2027 elections, and as well as delivery hitches keep relief aid in warehouses as Turkana residents staff. That's on page 26 of the Daily Nation. Now let's take a look on what's making headlines in the Standard newspaper this particular morning. And this story was actually in yesterday's the Standard newspaper. And the top story is actually passports for crooks. Of course, you can see pictures there of the Director General of Immigration Services, Elin Jelugat, on the sidelines of your screen, and as well as the controversial Zimbabwean business Wikel Chivayo is also among those said to be waiting for the document, and as well as another gentleman right there. Right. Now, the Standard says that Kenya's passport was quietly repurposed into a shield of individuals linked to Sudan's brutal conflict. An investigation reveals how rogue immigration officials bypassed biometric safeguards, manipulated applications, and erased digital records to grant citizenship to persons associated with the Rapid Support Forces and other shoddy characters, with children's identities reportedly used as decoys and approvals traced to senior authorities. The unfolding scandal shows how the country's sovereignty was traded for money and favors. That's a story as well on page 4 of the Standard. Now, on page 2, do's and don'ts, how to guard the spiritual essence of Ramadan. I will remember that our Muslim brothers and sisters actually commenced their Ramadan fasting. Right. Now, still on page 2, beyond the divine nourishment, fasting and many physical benefits. That's as well on our matters to do with Ramadan Kareem. And I spent lavishly with Mackenzie after selling my land, witness says. Now, Paul Mackenzie, trusted security guard turned Finos Amaya, boarded a flight with his wife to Shakahola immediately after selling his land in Nairobi's Kasarani area. Now, after selling his land for 700,000 Kenya shillings, Amaya said that he felt rich and generous, spending the money on food for Mackenzie and his associates. Now he had been promised another parcel of land in Shakahola. Amaya said he booked a jumbo jet flight to Malindi, where he lived lavishly with Mackenzie and George Mwaura, a pastor overseeing Mackenzie's Good News International Ministry, Makongeni branch in Nairobi. Now, yesterday, Amanya told Chief Magistrate Alex Iduku that Mwaura duped him into booking the flight, and the 51-year-old father of 7 once a waste collection businessman in Nairobi and a homeowner in Kasarani lost all his wealth in his quest for a new life in Shakahola. Now, in Nairobi, Amanya attended the Pentecostal church and harbored ambitions of becoming a pastor. He accused Mwaura of conning him of 100,000, which he said he paid for the land he had been promised in Shakahola. Amanya also sent Mackenzie 100,000 to buy land on his behalf. However, Mwaura told the magistrate that all the money was spent on food, building materials and flights. Mwaura claimed that Amanya wanted to experience air travel, which cost him about 24,000 Kenya shillings. Now, Amanya said he initially believed he needed a passport to board a plane, but Mwaura informed him that passports are only required for international flights and that a national identity card would suffice. Now, he said that he sent Mwaura 100,000 to purchase land worth 70,000 Kenya shillings, as well as building materials and foodstuffs for use in Shakahola. Amanya accompanied Mwaura to a market where they bought food worth 16,000 Kenya shillings. The food was sent to Malindi by bus. Right, that's a story you may want to look at on page 3. It goes on and on exclusively on page 3 of the Standard newspaper this particular morning on matters, the corridors of justice as far as the Shakahola incident is concerned. Right, now moving on to matters politics on the Standard, violence and claims of voter bribery. Ward by-election, that was actually yesterday, and West Cabra's ward by-elections in Malava, Kakamega County narrowed down to a fierce contest between UDA and DCP parties with claims of voter bribery and cases of violence. At least 12,000 registered voters started to stream into 27 polling stations across the ward at around 6:30 a.m. to elect their new MCA to succeed David Ndakwa, who was elected MP following the death of Malulu Injendi. Now, there was a high presence of security officers drawn from the General Service Unit and the Administration Police. Some voters claimed of harassment and depossession of the identification cards in an attempt to rig the election. Right now at Mukungolo polling station, a vehicle belonging to UDA agents destroyed and some people injured. And at Muyuge Station, a stronghold of DCP candidate Bramwell Khaemba, there was a high presence of police officers after a group of young people stormed a shop where some people were allegedly bribing voters. And one may ask the question, will this ever come to an end? Of course, you'll remember during the by-elections, which were held in at least 6 constituencies, that was in November, date 27 of 2024. The by-elections, with like in the case of Malava, where there were attacks, properties were vandalized, and of course we actually saw some scuffle between the DP party leader, that is JB Moturi, and in Better North actually, with some leaders accusing him of wearing party colors during the by-election day. All right. Now, one would ask the question: what precedent that does these scenes paint a picture even as we head to 2027? Is the IEBC ready to conduct a general election if a small by-election in a particular constituency can actually be marred with violence and attacks and vandalism? Right? Quite unfortunate. Right, and of the speed that you're waking up to this particular morning, as far as news and the governance of this particular country is concerned, it is exactly 45 minutes past the top of the hour. We're taking another short commercial breather here on The Drift, but when we come back, we're going to have a conversation with Miss African Queen Kenya, and of course the first runners-up will be going to take, they'll be going to share insights on what it costs, what it means, and what it actually means to represent Kenya. All right, don't miss that particular conversation that's coming up to you next in just a few. Don't go too far.